Welcome to Next in Tech, an S&P Global Market Intelligence podcast where the world of emerging tech lives. I'm your host, Eric Hanselman, Chief Analyst for Industry and Company Data at S&P Global Market Intelligence. And today, we're going to be talking about the industrial metaverse with my guests, Neil Barbour and Ian Hughes. Welcome back to the podcast to both of you.
Great to be back, Eric.
Thank you very much. Here we go.
So we've talked a lot about progress with Metaverse and all of the associated things, although we do seem to be in this middle ground right now of there are a handful of folks out there who've said, oh, the Metaverse is over. This is the Metaverse dead? All these other kinds of things. And yet there is a lot that's going on with the Metaverse, including our most recent study work that's covering a lot of industry attitudes around Analysts. This is something where it still seems to be very much alive, or are rumors of its demise not well founded? To start off, where do we stand? What's been going on?
Well, as you said, lots of people think that the Metaverse maybe doesn't exist anymore or never existed in the first place, but it's really still about the ongoing digital transformation of all these various industries that we cover and we look at, whether it's in consumer space or whether it's, as we're talking here, more about the industrial space. And in our surveys, we run a specific industrial and enterprise Metaverse survey, which we've done for the past 3 years, and we run a specific consumer survey about Metaverse. And none of those surveys are coming back and saying, no, this isn't happening. So, because we'd notice. So, for instance, the industrial Metaverse side of things specifically, 37% of the 1,000 or so respondents say they're already engaged in industrial Metaverse applications. And a further 27% are going to in the next 12 months. So that's a lot of people and a lot of big industrial companies. And so in that space, it's less prone to the kind of vagaries of press highlights and buzzwords and things, and more about does this improve what we're doing? And the digital transformation of industry, and particularly manufacturing industries and things like that, is happening at a pace. It's not just IoT, it's not just slamming sensors on things, but it's a full end-to-end digital thread that people are trying to get to. But being manufacturing, being industry, it's very, very slow moving because it has to work. So it's not the frivolity of messing around with stuff and just, oh, well, we'll just install another version. It has to be solid. But given we've got such big players involved in this, people like Siemens, for instance, they still are very focused on industrial metaverse and talk about industrial metaverse. And it's the vision that's being put forward. And it's happening, as we can see from the survey results. So it's not a thing that you just wake up one morning and, oh, look, there's a metaverse over there. But it is this constant improvement to how you know what's going on in the world in the case of manufacturing.
Yeah, and I think maybe what you saw over the past 2 years was a definitive shift in terms of an enterprise and industrial capital expenditures toward foundational AI technologies, right? So they were building into the hardware and software that would stand up longer-term solutions built around large language models and other sort of foundational technologies. And I think maybe what we're going to start seeing, if we haven't already, and I think Ian and I have some examples of where the rubber meets the road here, is that now you can leverage those foundational technologies into the broader digital transformation strategies that will incorporate digital twins and other metaverse, virtual world leaning technologies into, creating better ROI cases and streamlining the handoff between different subsegments within corporations and industrial operations.
Well, and it seems like this is one of those things that it burst onto the scene, as with many other technology transitions. There was a huge uproar around it that then faded, but now we've actually started to get towards the real use cases. If we look at especially what I guess got tagged originally as some of the consumer side pieces of this, you look at headsets and such, there all of the various sort of metaverse discussions have moved from, what was, I guess, that very pure metaverse tagging to now, augmented reality, virtual reality. It was interesting to see that there's been a significant uptake in Apple Vision Pro headsets, for example, and all being driven by industrial uses, or primarily being driven by industrial uses, and a whole bunch of things that I think we talked about originally. And we're getting to a point at which we've now got more sophistication, because we looked at all the work that got done with sort of the Microsoft HoloLens kind of things, with training and maintenance and those kinds of things. And now we're starting to see applications that are actually leveraging some of the higher resolution capabilities that the Apple devices can do, and use cases where this seems to be getting much more practical and specific.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the consumer applications and the kind of hardware that you can deliver at a consumer-friendly price point, there is a fairly low ceiling of use cases, and most of it's gaming, right? And so there was some success bringing traditional gamers over into the headsets for a while, and then it sort of seemed like maybe the growth trajectory had leveled off. And I think that's where you saw these mixed reality headsets start to come in. And they came in at price points that weren't consumer friendly. So if you see a $3,500 Apple Vision Pro headset, you may as well see what consumer wants to come in the door and buy that device. But really, these are enterprise grade, industrial grade headsets. And so that's where you're seeing a lot of the use cases come in.
And I would say again, mentioning Siemens again, they're partnered with Sony on a specific headset for engineering, which is a mixed reality headset with some specifically precise controls to enable you to build things. So they're kind of starting at the CAD end of things, but it's also then saying, well, this is the start of, as I mentioned before, the start of the digital thread. And when you see kind of press releases like the FIA have now said that Siemens is the digital twin business partner for Formula One and all the other formulas that FIA have, they are the digital twin partner with all these tools to create a complete end-to-end digital ecosystem on which the entire, Formula One racing, all the teams kind of sit upon. And it's all about being able to design and test in a more eco-friendly way, because you're not building lots of engineering things and then shoving them in wind tunnels. You're doing a simulation of something, and that's cheaper and quicker and uses less raw material and less energy, but can also be regulated better, I guess, because you want all the teams to have the same access to everything. So when you get the pinnacle of motorsport using digital twin terminology for a digital thread, we're kind of making it more, it's becoming more accessible to people and more understandable, because you go, well, I get what Formula One is, hopefully. And how does that apply then to my business and my industry?
Well, that cheaper, faster turnaround. I mean, that seems, this is the thing. If we've got the ability to simulate it, we can adapt it, we can change it, we can shift designs and get real world experience. I was also noticing CAE, the big aircraft simulation and training outfit, is shifting, because guess what? Great big huge simulators for aircraft are very expensive, and yet you can do so much of the stuff that's complicated, all of the procedural training, all of the crew integration, those kinds of things. You don't need the pitching around. You actually need an environment in which the crews can work together, and, by the way, not having to take them offline, not having to ship them down to wherever the training site happens to be, being able to now save time, money, crew resource time, and still do training for what are the more important and safety critical aspects, are a big part of what that does. And now you've got the ability to create a virtual training environment where you've got the participants who can be located, who knows where.
So the ability to create those environments, that there's obviously somewhere you need to be utterly precise in engineering terms for things like training and safety and those kind of simulations. But the the other layer on that, and we kind of alluded to it before, is the use of and the integration of AI into the ability to create those environments. So we know it used to be a highly specialized thing to be able to create a full 3D environment. I mean, a lot of game companies can do it, but it's not easy for everyone to do necessarily. You need to try and, it's a different way of thinking, different set of tools. But we're now getting to the LLM stage of being able to create actual worlds, not just create images, not just create video, not just create poems or whatever, but which are all great, but to actually be able to create physical environments or simulations of physical environments, whether it be real or fantasy. And that changes the way all that works. If you are building a new factory and you want to train a robot in a virtual environment, but you want to simulate some particular disaster or uncomfortable situation, you can just ask the LLM to say, well, can you put a spillage in aisle 3, please? And it will create one. And you don't need masses of people involved in a 3-month project to build that spillage. And then if you want the spillage in aisle 2, you can move it. And so that's a fundamental difference. As people, we understand 3D space, and so we can describe it.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, like, the idea of reducing friction around creating digital worlds and the assets that go in those worlds. There's a partnership between Accenture and Nestle right now where the marketing team can just take a picture of the device or a product that they're using, and then it'll make a fully fleshed out 3D model of that device, and that can go right into their materials and then back up to CAD for the industrial use case. So that digital thread throughout the company that Ian was talking about before, but also the idea of just pointing a camera at something, having the repository of data around 3D objects to then use the large language model or whatever models that would best fit this case to just neatly, cleanly, and quickly make that 3D model that you needed instead of having to hire an extra team or outsource that asset generation.
Well, it starts getting the idea of the digital thread, of ensuring that you've got the ability to be able to go build that fully digital experience. It seems like we've got enough of the different piece parts that are now pulling it together. We have AI capabilities now going far beyond, the days of non-player characters in games, sort of wandering aimlessly and bumping into things is well behind us, because we've now got ways to actually simulate environments and the various things that exist within them in ways that are far more realistic. And talking about being able to capture, it seems like that next stage is now getting towards enabling some of the functional elements of that to really become, how do you create the digital twin? How do you create, the behaviors of those capabilities? It seems like that's sort of that next level. Are we getting closer to those sorts of environments?
Yes. So the
simple answer.
Yeah. So all the things are getting easier to do. Whatever the things, it used to be really difficult to create a digital model of something that existed. So now the kind of variants of the Neil was talking about reality capture to pull those things in and to usually enhance with AI so it understands the size and shape and the boundaries of stuff and just general image processing stuff. That's got easier to be able to put things together in the environment, as I just mentioned, to say, well, I want this particular style of place and thing to happen has got easier. And it's even down to the fact that some of this you can just do on an iPhone app. So when you get to some of these things are that simple, they're clearly a lot cheaper to do than they would have been 10 years ago, and people are more likely to be experimenting on their own at home, doing stuff, trying stuff out, and then they go into whatever work they do and go, well, why can't we do it like this? And so that acceptance that you can work digitally is a huge cultural shift as well, isn't it? So you've got the technology's moved, and then enough people have moved through the workplace now that have grown up with digital technology to say, well, why have I got a clipboard? What's going on? And so all those things, the cost, the social understanding, they're all in the right place. And when you pile on the autonomy and the AI elements of those things, and autonomous robots and all these things going on as well, we're moving forwards. It just doesn't necessarily feel like it because it's boiling the frog, isn't it? So it's very slow. It feels very slow. But then sometimes you look at things and you go, well, even a year ago, how on earth didn't exist? If you look at all the humanoid robots, they're bouncing around all over the place now. It's online, you're constantly seeing humanoid robots dancing and fighting, and that's all part of this change for how we interact with the physical and digital world.
So in terms of where we're headed with this, I'm curious, well, actually, before I get too far along, some of the study results, I'm curious what the highlights are and some of what those takeaways are, some of the indications about what the study is showing us.
Well, certainly on the industrial side of things, it's a constant move forward. So the numbers are going up to say more people are doing more things that we would regard as industrial metaverse. And as I said at the top, it's the majority of industrial companies are engaged in this in some way, the ones that we talk to. But one of the things that I've been trying to make sure we track as well is not just that kind of high level, is it under the umbrella of this word? Because obviously that you can drop all sorts of things into that, but it's about the maturity of the integration of all the systems. So you might have some training system, and then you might have some design system, and you might have some warehouse system, but if they're not actually integrated in any way and not sharing information with one another, then you've just got a load of silos. They just happen to be digital ones. So trying to get to see where those crossovers are is one of the things that we ask in quite detailed levels of questions, particularly about digital twin integration. And so we say, how are you using twins? Do you have lots of different ones, or do you have lots kind of combined? And we're seeing more things that are starting to have some degree of operational integration. It doesn't mean it's solved yet. It doesn't mean perfect twin alignment with everything, but it's getting to the point that we have this maturity thing that we can follow to say, well, people that are doing this are starting to pull these things together. And that's whether it's kind of the manufacturing side of things, or whether it's the enterprise side of things, or whether it's B2C side of things. That degree of all these things have to talk to one another is the important bit.
And is that something we've talked on previous episodes about, how there have been really these ecosystems, a lot of which grew out of gaming environments in some form or fashion? Are we getting to a point at which we've got industrial ecosystems that can start to bolt up and, more importantly, interchange some of these digital assets that are driving the underlying capabilities?
Yeah, the main thing that's helping that is the standardization around OpenUSD, which I'm sure we've talked about before, but I'll mention it again. So Universal Scene Descriptor is a way of describing not just what the things are, but what they do in any level of abstraction in the environment. So it could be what's on the shop floor or what's in the entire set of factories you have. It can be any level. And it's not just for industrial, it's used in lots of other things. So all the tool providers, as in software tools, are starting to support OpenUSD and contribute to it. And all the major players, NVIDIA's a key one that kind of open sourced this in the first place. But and again, Siemens and Adobe and all that. Everyone's engaged in these, and the game platforms like Unity and Unreal kind of sit in this space as well. And this becomes the way that this stuff, this data and these things can move from place to place in whatever scenario you need it to be. And this is the one that came originally from Pixar. So when Pixar were making making animated movies, they needed to be able to describe the scenes from one tool to another as they made these things. And so this became a very robust thing for making very expensive movies. And now it's become a thing for saying how you simulate a factory, but it can also be a thing how you interchange game assets between game platforms. And it's more than the file format. And it's open source and lots of people contributing to it. So I think that's the kind of go-to thing. That's the thing that I look at the most to go, well, is this happening? Because if that was dying, then we'd be in trouble, but it's not. It's growing all the time.
Yeah, and I would say, you know, looking ahead a little bit, I would point to this really interesting demo I saw a week ago called Project Orbion, which is a collaboration between defense contractor Echelon, Niantic Spatial, a couple of satellite information companies, trying to establish ground truth down to the centimeter level. They sometimes use the term large world model. So to help think about it as like a Google Maps, but way more, right? Like you can actually establish movement of objects on the ground. It has the weather patterns. So when you can roll up all of these digital assets inside of a USD, so to speak, and then say, well, what would that be like if it were actually right here in the real world? What would be the impacts on it? What would be, the impacts on traffic, maybe the impacts on geography. So, that's somewhat in the more distant future, but thinking about the amount of data that Niantic has been able to collect on the world around us just by having people playing Pokemon Go point their cameras at every corner of the globe, right? And then think about pointing a bunch of satellites at one spot. And also, there's certainly an amount of data that Echelon has itself. When you combine all of those, you can really make a true global digital twin and then start importing your own data into it and see how it works.
And getting to the point at which you can start to simulate the digital worlds. To your point, interesting to see that gaming providers like Niantic who've had to do that level of spatial mapping. Seems like there's a natural adjacency in terms of where they go next, as far as what they can simulate and the kind of data assets they already have to give them perspectives about what the world really looks like.
Well, that's one of the interesting things that it was a few months ago now, but Niantic effectively sold off Pokemon Go, and pivoted, even though they're hugely successful, pivoted to be Niantic Spatial to provide this next level of mapping to enterprises and industrial and defense and the things that Neil just mentioned. So they know how important it is. And that's, whilst they've learned a lot doing, and they're still going to support Pokemon Go as a provider, but it's now with somebody else. So they've said, this is a big enough industry that I don't have to just do Pokemon now. I can do lorries and factories and offices and all these other things. So that's another kind of big indicator for a company that big to make that bigger move and pivot when they were doing really well anyway is interesting, I think.
Yeah, to give you an example of the kinds of things they can do with the technology they have, is they partnered with the Coast Guard. If a helicopter needs to land at a disaster zone or an emergency zone, and there's not really a great or an obvious landing zone for that helicopter, somebody at the site can take a picture just with their phone as they would point it with their, as they would use the Pokemon Go app, just point their phone at something. And it can take a reading of the area and then find or establish the best place for that helicopter to land just by sort of pointing your phone at it.
Being able to translate the real world into a digital representation in which you can start to evaluate, if we put a helicopter into this environment, where would it fit?
Exactly.
Tetris for helicopters, I guess, is where we're headed next. Well, you basically, I think, brought us full circle. I notice Niantic is not heading towards, Niantic Metaverse. They're talking, Niantic Spatial is talking about the spatial computing piece. That really, I think, is that shift in language, and yet it is all the same things we've been talking about in Metaverse for these many years, and now with just a slightly different label on it. Well, I appreciate all of your insights. This has been great, and thank you both for being back on the podcast.
Thank you very much for having us.
Definitely. Thanks, Eric.
And that is it for this episode of Next in Tech. Thanks to our audience for staying with us. And thanks to our production team, including Sophie Carr for On Mutation and Kira Smith on the marketing and events teams. I hope you'll join us for our next episode, because there is always something next in tech.